Hi everyone, my name's Tom Holmes. I am lead business analyst at Sky Betting and Gaming. My talk today is about innovation. Now, out there's tons and tons of talks about innovation and about how it's amazing and it changes the world and how it's great, which is brilliant if you're really good at it. But if you're struggling with it, it's not so great. So what I want to do is do a talk about the flip side, about what happens if your teams aren't innovating well and are finding it difficult. So the point of today really is to give you some tips around that stuff, so that if you're finding your teams are struggling, you can implement some changes and try and change the way that we work. But also, if you're finding that you're new to this stuff, then should hopefully give you a really great place to start. So when I thought about this talk, I had a bit of a panic because I look back and for 15 years I've done talks about delivery. I've been kind of over in this kind of build, test, learn space, kind of what we're going to build, how we're going to build it, how we're going to get it across the line. And suddenly I was wanting to talk about innovation, which is kind of over this side, which is sort of sits between kind of strategy and kind of program management, kind of a long way away from where I'm familiar. And I started to think, I've actually created a talk that's basically a product talk or a UX talk here, and are you guys going to just be like switched off by the whole thing? I kind of went down that rabbit hole a little bit, and then I sort of talked myself out of it because I realized that the innovation part of this software lifecycle is really, really important, because we're the people who build this stuff down here, but we have to be bought into it up here. And what's really, really important is that this gets the right inputs, so it has the right outputs. And if we don't believe in this process and it's stalling and it's failing, then over this side, we just end up blindly building things that we don't believe in. We just get stuff shoveled down the pipeline to us, and we don't really want to be in this space because it's not effective. So what this talk is about today really is about how important the input is at this point here, because it feeds everything that happens after it. So I think it's really, really important to acknowledge the amount of energy that goes into innovation. Like, this is just an example of something that we did probably 2 weeks ago. And this, believe it or not, is actually a trimmed down, edited version of the output from a 5-day product design sprint. Now, each of these cards has had probably 5 or 10 other cards associated with it that have been crossed out and scribbled out because they're not quite right. And people invested so much time and effort into getting this into this state that it's really, really demoralizing if this stuff goes nowhere. If the team put this much effort in and exhaust that much energy getting this stuff there, if then it stalls and doesn't get delivered, it's a terrible thing and it's a terrible waste. And what you see, and this is really important for you guys, because this is the sort of stuff that you'll start to see people say in retros, or when invites come along to innovation sessions, you'll see people starting to make comments like this. So our great ideas just sit on the shelf, but nothing ever gets built. A big one is the business always has other priorities. Like, you're having these amazing ideas in one space, but the business is going in a completely different direction. So how are you going to land that stuff? How are you going to get it on people's roadmaps? The sessions are fun, but we don't get much out of them. People like the kind of getting their heads into kind of a new space, and they enjoy the kind of the energy of innovating and having ideas. But then the actual act of nothing coming off the back of it is really demoralizing. And the kind of the big one you see, which is a real kind of red flag that things are not going well, is you get people like engineers saying things like, I can't spare the time to attend anymore. I leave that stuff to others. I'm too busy building the now. That's people who've basically given up on that stuff and said, I'm happy to be the feature factory. You guys do the innovation stuff. I'll just churn it out. So to kind of diagnose what's going on and wrong in this world, I want to talk about the 3 common types of innovation that exist. So the first one is customer-driven innovation. This is stuff where either your customers are telling you they want something that's new and exciting, or you're looking at a market and saying there's a bunch of customers over there that we're not appealing to, so we could build something that would bring them in. The next one is capability-driven innovation. This is where you go, tech team over here has built this amazing new tool, tech team over here have got this tool. If we mash these things together, we create this amazing new thing. This is where you get your big game-changing leaps, where an industry will be changed, and this is the sort of stuff where it's difficult for other businesses to catch up on. This is the kind of the really exciting stuff. This stuff is quite long tail. It takes a long time because you have these ideas, but you've got to test them with customers. And what tends to happen in this space is the idea goes through so many iterations and takes so long to kind of to reach reality that the people who came up with it originally, they've lost contact with it. So it appears on a roadmap at some point in the future, but they've lost contact with it, and they kind of consider it as something that never saw the light of day. This is exciting and great. It's disruptive and it changes the world, but it's very difficult to land. So the thing I want to really focus on today is the third one, which is problem-driven innovation. Now, problem-driven innovation deals with what's going on right now. We're talking about problems that the business is experiencing. In this instance, what do we need to change to make this business more effective? So kind of carrying that on, you can kind of say the problem-driven innovation is about now, customer-driven innovation is about what's coming next, and capability-driven innovation is about what's coming next. So you've got kind of the immediate, the future, and then the further future. So if we're going to go down a problem-based route for our ideation, how do you find problems? Well, it's easy. Every business, large or small, collects data, and they'll have graphs like this. This is just an example that I've sort of made for this presentation. They'll be looking at things like site visits and logins, and they'll have targets around these things, so they'll be expecting these graphs to kind of trend upwards at a certain rate. But if something's going down, where they're expecting it to go up, there's a problem there, and there's an opportunity to fix that stuff. And if it's been going down for a long period of time, there's probably a business strategy that sits behind that, that's to fix that and to remedy it. So if you speak to your finance teams, to data teams, to business intelligence teams, they'll be able to tell you where the problems lie right now and give you real solid things that, if you fix them, will make a massive difference. So the benefits of choosing problem-driven innovation are that you're likely going to be iterating on something you've already built. So you've got something there that already exists. You're not building something completely new that takes time and has dependencies and is reliant on a whole kind of mechanism of support. What you're doing is you're living the MVP thing. How many of us build MVPs where they go out and then we don't go back and iterate upon them? This is about getting that MVP and making it better and better and better. Because it's kind of part of that build, test, learn piece, which if your business is bought into Agile and Lean and believes in that stuff, it's easy to prioritize because we should always be iterating on things and we should be building. So you're not about trying to bring something completely new into roadmaps. You're on about trying to improve what you've already built and maximize on that investment that's already there. It's also well understood, so that the teams who are doing the iteration, they've built this thing and they built it quite recently and they know it quite well. So they can kind of say, look, we could just tweak it and we could just make it do this instead. And also, ideally, it maps back to your current strategy. Like I said on the graph slide, if there's a problem that's been around for a while, your business has already probably got a strategy around fixing that stuff. So you come along and say, I want to run some iteration some innovation that's going to add to that effort. It's going to be a big thumbs up from the business and it's got a good chance of seeing the light of day. What you don't get, or what you're less likely to get from the problem-driven stuff, you're less likely to get that game-changing idea. So you're less likely to find something that's going to completely disrupt a market, that's going to terrify your competitors, that's going to change the world. And you're also unlikely to identify new markets or opportunities with stuff. You might find these things, but if you've got marketing teams who are looking for big market messages, problem-driven stuff probably isn't the greatest thing to do. But if you've got teams who are just struggling to innovate and struggling to kind of find a foothold in this world, problem-driven stuff is a really good place to start. So once you've identified a problem area, like the one we've got on the previous slide around the new user stuff, what you need to do then is to write a problem statement around it. And what you're ideally trying to do is to write a number of problem statements. So you're meeting the people who've got the access to that data, and you're basically taking them through a bunch of questions to try and categorize what makes up the problem. So currently our offering does not appeal to new users. This is a problem because we've got a load of targets around new users. We're supposed to be attracting 500,000 new users every year, and we're completely failing it at the moment. Who's been impacted is really important. So this is the bit where the problem statements start to break into lots and lots of different problem statements. So it might be the case that we're not attracting new users from Facebook, or it might be the case that we're not attracting new users from our competitors or from Twitter. This is the bit where you get granular and you break these into individual statements. What are our competitors doing? Are they eating our lunch? Are they basically taking customers that we wanted and stealing them because they're doing something that's better than us? Then we start to get into the kind of objectives and key results bit of this. We'll know this has been resolved when we see that graph start to turn upwards and we kind of correct that downward trend. and we'll be satisfied when it gets up to the targets that we were supposed to achieve at the start of the financial year. And this will help us to achieve our objective of, this bit is about the strategy bit. So if you're tapped into what the business's strategies are, you can land the fact that this problem statement is a strategic initiative in that space at this point, which gives it a really, really great chance of seeing the light of day. And lastly, we've got this has been identified by. So what I mean by this is who came up with this problem and what is the source of the data that they're relying on when they talk about this problem, and how many sources of data are there? Now, this is really, really important, which I'll come to in a sec, because what happens here is you end up with what you thought was maybe one problem statement is split into 7 or 8 different problem statements. So you find yourself in a position where you're like, okay, so I've got this team, we're gonna do some ideation, which problem statement do I choose? So how do you choose the right problem statement? Now, anybody who knows me knows I love a good crosshair. They're dotted all over the office and they're constantly kind of changing and being tweaked. But for this one, we've got, on the first axis, we've got high value. And on the side axis, we've got high confidence. Now, what we do is we write our problem statements on cards and we plot them on the wall. This is almost actually kind of life size, actually, it's quite good. And then what we can do is we can comparatively size them on these scales against each other. So this one is kind of assuming is slightly higher value than that one, etc. Now, when we're talking about value, what we're talking about is how big an opportunity does fixing that problem represent? So the example I used before was like kind of if we're looking to attract new users from Facebook or Twitter, if we've got 100,000 people on Facebook but 10,000 people on Twitter, there's more value in fixing the Facebook problem. So that allows us to kind of prioritize things on that axis. And what we're looking for really is stuff that's landing in that kind of high value space. These are things that make a lot of sense to build. If they're in this space, they're low value. You could do the most amazing ideation session with this stuff and generate a ton of brilliant ideas, but it's barely going to make a dent on the graphs because there isn't the value there. The opportunity size isn't as great. Next, a little bit about confidence. So confidence comes back to how much you believe the data. This is data-driven problem ideation, so the data piece is really, really important. If you build something that's based on fudged or wrong or incorrect data that you don't believe in, then you could just build something by mistake completely, and it could completely fail in the market. So you've got to believe in the data. If you've got a hunch, hey, I think we might not be getting good customers because of X. If it's a hunch, it's down this end of the scale, okay? It lives down here. It might be really, really valuable, but it still isn't something you really believe and you don't have that confidence about it. If it's really valuable, then what you do is you move it into explore. We've got something over here. We think it's really, really valuable if we fix it, but we need some data that proves it's the right thing to do. So we move it into explore, we push it back to the finance teams and the business intelligence teams, and they see if they can actually provide some evidence that it's worth doing. So what we're really looking for on the confidence scale is stuff up this end. If it's up this end and we believe in it, it's the right, it looks like the right thing to do. So you mix the two things together and you've got high value, high confidence in this zone here. Now, if it was me and I had a team who were wanting to ideate, I would choose that one because that's the highest value and the highest confidence. And then I'd get the team together and I would run an ideation session. I'd let UX and product do that stuff, but I would know and I'd be confident that the input that we've got into that session is something that's strategically correct, potentially, that's really, really high value, that we believe in the data that backs it up. So at the start of my presentation, I put this slide up. And when I kind of started laying out the slides for this, I wanted to find a really nice definition of what it meant to innovate. And I was a bit disappointed by what I found. I was expecting it to be stuff about kind of collaboration and teamwork and building the future, but it's actually quite dry. But if you think about it in the context of what I've just been talking about, this is actually a very true, good first start point. If you make changes in something that's established by introducing new ideas, that's a good footing to begin with. And once you get that footing right and you build goodwill from your squads and from the business that it's worth allowing people to do this stuff and giving them the space and the time to do it, then you can look at the customer stuff and then you can look at the more tech-led stuff. That's my talk. Thank you.